Actually, Alex is, maybe has a reputation for telling some untruths already. I won't be speaking about simulations at all. Next page is this one? Oh, okay. What I'm going to talk about is just fundamentally how to understand dynamic systems and their transitions. I'm going to start here with a quotation from Buckminster Fuller. Does anyone know what that shape is? It's a buckyball. It's a Buckminster Fullerene. He was a very smart guy, and I'm sure that if he talked to you, he would certainly increase your IQ by 2 points. I don't think I can do that, but he says you never change things by fighting the existing reality. You change something, to change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And what we need to do is build new models, and we're limited, I think, by the models that we bring to the table when we do that. Now, we do have some new tools in the forms of blockchain, and I didn't understand a word that this young man said, but it sure sounded exciting. And what's really great about Korea is, as you know, Aristotle said that the medium-sized country is the most easiest and best to manage. So Korea is in a great position, both with its information technologies and its size, to perform this kind of transition from a corrupted central government into something distributed and decentralized. So what I want to talk about is how we can use information communication technologies, including blockchain. And also I want to return to this notion from earlier speakers yesterday in fundamental science education, educating children in the fundamentals of science so they can bring these models to bear in solving these future problems, not just in a technologically inventive way, but in a way that's also lasting and sustainable. Now, the really great thing about government institutions is they do last. We can depend on them. They tend to get worse. Corrupted people go to the top. We say that the people who least deserve power are the ones who want it the most. And in the current system, they get it. So we want to temper this potential. Anyways, let's see. I'm going here. Wrong button. There we go. Okay. One problem is that, as we noted yesterday with the education speakers, currently the children are not educated in a way that they have the models to bring to bear. Currently children are educated as technicians. They're not rewarded to understand the fundamentals of science, and instead, I taught at KAIST. I don't teach there now. I taught at KAIST from 2010 to 2015. I took a job as a researcher for a while with some neural network guys, and then I quit. But I had a lot of trouble with the kids down there too. They were used to succeeding by memorizing something and sticking that answer into a blank. And when I pushed them to think for themselves, I got quite a bit of resistance from some of the kids. I think they expected that trick to succeed, to guarantee their success for life, and I challenged them not to. I'm going to tell you a couple secrets about me. One is that I bought these shoes in 1991. I bring them out for special occasions, weddings and funerals and leadership conferences. As you can see, they're not very well used, so I haven't gone to very many funerals, which is a good thing. My work focuses on two projects. One is to understand human consciousness and free will in a way that we can engineer it and then quantify it. And there's two reasons why I want to do this, but the reason that attaches to this conference is I want to be able to simulate dynamic systems, political systems, economic systems in their transitions from unsustainable, high-energy, tense and strained conditions through the necessary transition states into more sustainable conformations. Now, because this process may take 10 generations, in the past this would be accomplished by religious narratives. I'm going to try to show how we can accomplish this task in a different way. Abolishing government. Now, this is very strong language. Abolish means to get rid of. But govern, we can trace it back to this notion of piloting a ship. Now, this doesn't sound so bad, right? I mean, all of us should be better ship pilots for our own ships. So we should be able to govern ourselves. But before people can govern themselves, maybe there's a role for somebody else to advise them. Obviously, with children, this is true. But it's easy to understand why we use such strong language when we talk about current government. I mean, here's some Hillary Clinton email archive from the WikiLeaks. I mean, here's an obvious criminal who's been outed. If you look on the television news, you'll see a lot of protests against Donald Trump. But if you do a quick search on Craigslist, you're going to see that people are advertising to go to these protests. They're paying $35 an hour to hold up a Rape Melania sign. This is a picture of the Seoul protest there. It's not as pretty as the other people's. Anyways, we have a lot of reason to not trust what's happening. But at the same time, it seems unreasonable to get rid of any sort of top-down direction. Here's an example of something that's happened in the United States. A student was kicked out of class, this is in a university, for not agreeing with the teacher that the election of Donald Trump was worse than 9/11. And so he's thrown out of his school. I think someone should intervene in this case. We have anti-Trump protesters causing deaths of, stopping ambulances from moving. Somebody needs to get in there and do something about it, and we're not going to be able to wait for some smart contract to get that done. Here's more reasons for us to doubt everything that we hear. Poor Suzanne, she gave us some numbers about the recent election, which are obviously false. It turns out that 3 million non-citizens voted in this last election, and they didn't vote for Donald Trump. So the numbers that you're seeing on MSNBC are obviously false. And for what reason? Well, we know. When I was going through this, I thought, you know what? I remember this quote from Mark Twain. I wanted to show it. If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you read the newspaper, you are misinformed. So I wanted to use this quote and say, this guy's been thinking this way. But it turns out that also was a lie. He didn't even say that. And I had to find that out for myself. So we have we have some trust issues, and this causes a lot of anxiety about the future. And this really revolves around this problem with bad leadership. Here we see the global system actually in transition. A great many nation states are moving away from their prior associations, especially with the increasingly, belligerent United States. So here, I'm going to show you a cartoon. I'm a Socratic philosopher, and Socrates often used this notion of a pilot of a ship to talk to people about how to govern themselves. I'm going to tell a quick story about the evolution of human civilization here. At the bottom line, we have nature. If there were no humans, the cycles of nature would be along this bottom line. We see humanity rising here as a slope, and we begin to build the organizations that we now have as institutions, economic structures, and things like that. Maintaining these structures require that we take a lot of energy away from the natural system and support this organization. Now, I've put our ship of state, the global condition here at this ship. And there's a few problems for leaders in this position. Some of them are made for themselves. For example, Obama has proposed $1 trillion more in the development and advancement of nuclear weapons. And so I put this in front. I mean, that's a lot of money, a lot of energy, and also part of this curve is not just physical energy, it's mental energy, it's strain and it's stress. That's all internalized in the people. When we have the strain and stress, we have to get rid of it. This causes, we need to pour more energy into entertainment services. We need to pour more energy into other forms of distractions just to maintain the arrangement that we've got so people can stay mentally healthy along the way. Now, what we'd like to do is we'd like to move away from these strained conditions, and we'd like to come down to something more sustainable in terms of the natural system. How can we navigate this transition? Typically in history, these kinds of, if it's a rapid transition, it's accomplished through war and violence. And what I'd like to do is avoid this. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit more now. Information technology can help us to lower the uncertainty as we manage this transition. We've heard something about blockchains. One thing about blockchains is that it's said to be disruptive. It's disruptive to the centralized power structure, obviously. It won't be so disruptive to people who are busy in creating new structures to replace those power structures. Still, blockchain technologies are a form of governance. So we're not going to abolish government. We're going to augment it, we're going to transform it, and we're going to do this through empowering people. Blockchain technologies essentially lower the barrier to self-determination. And I know we just heard from this young man about the use of blockchains in ensuring government. Here's some more movement in this direction. But these technological problems don't necessarily solve the problems of sustainability and vision going forward. Now, we can invent a new technologically rich society that just draws more and more energy from the natural world and is still not sustainable in the long run. I see these technologies mostly, their virtue is in easing the transition to something more sustainable, at which point they're likely not going to be useful anymore, and then we're going to get rid of them and do something else. This is another young man, Leo Tolstoy. I'm a great fan of his, and especially this book. And so he has a vision of, in this book, of how to get rid of the corruption. One thing about blockchain technologies that's readily apparent is right away financial services professionals go away. And this is part of his story. Is anyone familiar with this story? Ivan the Fool? You know, I listen to this on my headphones when I ride my bicycle. I listen to Aristotle, I listen to Plato, I'm old, I think. Okay, next. All right, so I've been working in my lifetime to build these sorts of models to understand the human condition in a way that we can responsibly set out a forward path. Here's some things I've been published in the area. Okay. These are big questions, how to move forward. Now, you can object that maybe I just show you a cartoon or I give you some metaphor and this is it. It's not really much of an answer. But I work with some roboticists, some people on neural networks, and contemporary AI isn't programmed by if and then statements, right? We don't tell the machine what to think. We build a box that's very much like a brain, and then we let it experience the world. And it picks up habits and routines, it challenges those habits and routines, unlearns them, does other things. And the models that we use to develop these intelligences are actually natural system models. What happens inside of here is what happens in any dynamic system in the world. In nature, everything in nature moves to stability in terms of its environment. We see the same thing happening in the models of AI that work. Now, what we see here is chemistry. My background originally is in chemistry, and when I was very young, I wanted to try to understand how to manage these sorts of transitions. In high school, I began thinking about this problem. That was 35 years ago. And I did a class in chemistry, and I thought, there is a good answer. Now, a molecule in chemistry is an information sharing network. That information sharing network is aiming for the lowest energy, less strained state in terms of its environment. Everything in nature does that. We do that. When we walk into a room, we're looking for the best chair to sit in. That is the most comfortable place to be, and that's where we want to put ourselves. The molecule is the same way. Now, as we can see, this is part of a fundamental science education. At KAIST, most kids wouldn't understand the implication here. They're always trying to be in front. They're never really soaking in the implications of the fundamentals. So I had some friction there. What we see here is an energy state on this axis, and you see this is a stable state, A. The molecule, the molecular system, the information sharing network is here. We can imagine this is a lot of energy required, right? It's energy inside the system. We add some activation energy. Now, this is usually kinetic. We hit it really hard, or we heat it up, thermodynamic energy, get it over this barrier, and then the molecule can find itself that best chair in the room. This is its most stable condition, right? Here, in the next slide, we see ourselves doing work. What we've got is a less complex molecular arrangement, and we add some energy to build a more complex molecular arrangement. This is what's been happening with government the last, 10,000 years, right? And slowly we've built ourselves a system that we can no longer maintain. The history of technology, history of labor-saving devices. And this should be no different when it comes to the abolition of government. Think about your television remote control. We think that this is progress in the human race because it saves us time and energy. Right now, we've put a lot of time and energy into managing other people. We'd be much better off if we educated individuals to manage themselves. And once that's possible, they can coordinate through information communication technologies and smart contracts to move forward. But until that's done, I think it's irresponsible to get rid of any kind of oversight. From yesterday in the education talk, this begins with the primary, the early education. So that the children understand that the systems that are here And the systems that are out there are the same sorts of systems. Then they can begin to plan a world that fits the human race very well. The big idea is when you look around, you don't see chairs and places to sit. You see an energetic landscape. This is opportunities. Remember the man yesterday who said, he said he was walking with the man who created the parkour, where they run through the cities. And the man who invented parkour doesn't see the buildings. He sees the spaces between as opportunities to move. Imagine this is the energetic landscape here. There's a barrier here. I can't go there, but this is much easier. I will go through this. This is typically called an affordance. In the literature, I call the space of opportunity. Okay, here's something about time. Now, if you look at this system, we see two different curves here. And this is interesting. The blue line is a higher energy state. This is a system that's influenced by its environment. In this case, it's the solvent environment for the molecular system. But we can imagine that it's the information environment. We can imagine that as the blue line is the misinformation coming from MSNBC. It's creating tension in the society. It's elevating the energies. People are feeling anxious, and the whole system is less stable. You move forward in the transition. Trump takes the presidency on that blue line. He immediately inherits a less stable system. The misinformation is already causing problems for our future. We can see it. As leaders ourselves and self-governors, we can anticipate what's happening because of this effort. Now, I'm going to come back to my cartoon. What we'd like to do, if you see that the ship, the top, I drew the picture. I mean, I tried really to draw the picture well. I'm not good at drawing, I think. But you can see the top of the ship. From the top of that ship, you cannot see over this activation energy barrier. There's a great deal of uncertainty about what's coming in the future. This adds to the tension, right? With information communication technologies and a fundamental understanding of dynamic systems, we can see forward into the future and anticipate what's coming. This not only lowers the anxiety, and it gets rid of many of the trust issues that are derived from bad leadership, but it lowers the energy barrier to manage the transition. It makes it possible. So if you look at the landscape of opportunity, again, this building, which had blocked that path, is now gone. Now we have an affordance, it's afforded to us by, an opportunity afforded to us by information technologies to move in the direction we otherwise couldn't. And here we have a system that doesn't have to lose much of the complexity we already have. We can have richer lives, I think, more honest lives in terms of nature, really, and stable, in a stable system, empowered in this way. Okay, so I'd like to close my talk with a note on autonomy. You know, I spent a lot of time thinking about autonomy, what it means to be autonomous. I do a lot of work in what's called machine ethics, and so what we try to do is understand and engineer fully autonomous robots. Well, what is autonomy? I mean, that's another hard question. Human autonomy itself must be understood. So I spent a lot of time reading Kant and Plato and Aristotle and to understand the history. And I read a lot of cognitive science and neuroscience and neurophenomenology and a lot of AI stuff, and to try to understand what autonomy means. And what autonomy really means is an ability to make rules for yourself, right? It's really an ability to self-govern. So what we'd like to do is maximize or optimize autonomy for everyone going forward. So it's really the great virtue of humanity. Human beings can do this. We don't think that other animals really can so much. I mean, it's clear to me that my dogs are self-governing, but they don't write about it, right? They don't build institutions to protect their autonomy. We can do it, and I think we can do it with information communication technologies, with the help of technology, and with the basic understanding of the systems that we are and that we have to live in terms of. We can augment self-governance through education. I think this is true. And we don't need any noble lies and coercion. This amounts to the new social contract spoken about this morning by Jerome Glenn in his talk, if anyone was there. Okay, so here's a little riddle I was going to give you. we'll move forward. Our next speaker is, he's actively promoting an integration of governance with information communication technology in the United States. He's going to talk to us about that next. And I was going to talk to something about religion, but here's something I found when I realized that that Mark Twain quote wasn't actually his. I found this one, and this is his. After all these years, I see that it was a mistaken about Eve in the beginning. It is better to live outside the garden with her than inside without. So I read that, and I didn't believe it because I saw it. I believe it because I live it. So here's my wife, Jen. So, thank you very much for your time.
And now it's my great pleasure.